You're listening to ayahuascapodcast.com.
I think of birth as a psychedelic experience. The medicine is the spirit coming through your body.
Dying is a psychedelic process. Being born is a psychedelic process. Giving birth is a psychedelic process. And so much more in between.
Like the mentors, the elders, the guides, the facilitators who impacted me and held space for me were just as important as the medicines. Humans are the only animals that don't understand, or we've forgotten how relational we are. Like, think about how many animals travel in packs. When did we stop doing that and why? We should really reconsider. We're better together. These medicines go into the brain and they create neurogenetic activity. And that is amazing because from a certain age, we automatically decrease our neurogenetic activity. That's what happens as we age. So when we introduce these medicines, we have an increase of plasticity, elasticity in our mind, and that enables us to have like new perspective on old things. And so the medicines can enter in and create an openness, a receptivity to what I would refer to as corrective experiences. When an honorary sort of like archetypal mother, father figure can offer an update or an upgrade to the information stored in the nervous system.
Hi guys, and welcome to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, we're the host, Sam Believ. Today I'm having an interview with Micah Stover. Micah is a certified psychedelic somatic therapist, educator, and author, specializing in trauma healing through psychedelic-assisted therapy. After a traumatic pregnancy experience, she pursued training in internal family systems and psychedelic somatic therapy. Based in Mexico, she hosts healing retreats and trains practitioners. Micah advocates for safe, accessible psychedelic therapy, blending clinical knowledge with indigenous practices. And she's also the author of the book, Healing Psychedelics. We talk about intergenerational healing and ancestral trauma, psychedelic nature of giving birth, healing postpartum depression with psychedelics, the role of nature and community in healing, nature deficit disorder, healing complex PTSD, preverbal trauma, using travel as a healing modality, commodification of psychedelics in the West, how psychedelic healing actually works, and so much more. Enjoy this episode. This episode is sponsored by La Huayra Ayahuasca Retreat. At La Huayra, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. La Huayra, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you. Micah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Micah, tell us about your story and how did you get into this line of work with mental health and with psychedelics?
Yeah, well, as you alluded in my introduction, a lot of what brought me to this particular chapter of my healing journey was a wildly traumatic pregnancy, and what that pregnancy I think unearthed for me was a whole lot of unprocessed intergenerational trauma. It's really kind of poignant and poetic the way things look when you look from the back, from hindsight. But, I'm a descendant of a lineage of midwives. And so it feels kind of somehow appropriate that this like cracking open that I experienced happened in the labor and delivery room and space. My son and I were lucky enough to make it out. We were okay. I lost one baby in that experience, a twin. And, when they sent us home, the message was, you guys made it. Like, you're survivors. You're awesome. But from a mental health standpoint, I was sort of broken. The culmination of 10 weeks in a hospital, the sort of brushed over loss of a vanishing twin, and the fragility of a tiny preemie, plus at like a resurgent of what I have come to understand as ancestral ghosts sort of screaming for help, was a lot. And I had some psychedelic experiences in the past, And I don't know if that was enough that it left like a footnote in my psyche, but I just felt a very clear call. That's the way to heal enough to be a good mom was going to require some pretty powerful tools.
I feel you. Sorry to hear that, and sorry to hear about losing one of the twins. I'm married as well, and we have 3 kids, and I've had from the husband's perspective, plenty of postpartum depression, and we had a miscarriage. Our first kid, we lost our first kid. But we do have 3 healthy kids now. Why do you think that happens? Like in your journey of understanding it, why do you think birthing a new child triggers that healing process? Do you have any thoughts about it? Because I think about it and I just don't understand why in such a vulnerable moment, and how do we take this chaos and this difficult moment as opportunity for healing? Just talk to us about that.
God, I could talk to you about this all day. Where to begin? I think of birth as a psychedelic experience. If we define psychedelic experience as our sense of I, our sense of self, our ego dissolving, our whole sense of time and space, and where we fit in it being redefined, as a woman giving birth, you're there, and that's the ceremony. The medicine is the spirit coming through your body. It is like a oneness with divinity for a certain period of time. If you think about any ceremony, it's like labor, contraction, expansion, pain, purge, and then something on the other side. And what felt to me like awoken out of that unexpected way for the birth to go was just a great call to understand epigenetically, how do these intergenerational trauma threads weave through time and space? What about we get better, but we're not better? One of the things my father often told me growing up is, you have it so much better than I did, which was not a lie. I mean, totally. I had it way better, but also I was wildly abused. So the relativity of better and what that means, for me, when I held my preemie in my hands, I just thought, oh my God, I'm not fully embodied. How am I going to mother him like this? I have to be alive, in my body, not just in my brain, which I'd gotten so comfortable just living in my brain. For me, my oldest now is 9.5, and all of my children are my best teachers, and each of their birth stories have been invitations for me to just come so much closer, just any sort of cosmological design understanding that there is. I don't know if it's my lineage or what, but I felt a strong connection to all of my babies they're not babies anymore, but I met them before they came to me, as spirits in dreams and ceremonies. And so my relationship with them began before they had a physical form. And I think a lot that's what conscious parenting is. It begins before they're born. But so many of us don't even know that we can have these kinds of interdimensional dialogues.
Yeah. I think I felt it before when I connected to my children before they were born. It is interesting that you say about, birthing process being psychedelic, because we just had a daughter 8 months ago, and I was there with my wife in the birthing room for the first time, even though it's our 3rd kid, but it's a first kid, after this whole COVID madness. So they actually let me in, and I was there with her, and she was crying and she was processing so much stuff. And obviously we run an ayahuasca retreat together, so she knows how it feels. And she's like, I'm full tripping. I'm having a full ayahuasca experience. It's very DMT and not just that, but it was a very productive experience where she was grieving some things and processing. And what I'm realizing more and more also through this podcast as I interview people, dying is a psychedelic process, being born is a psychedelic process, giving birth is a psychedelic process, and so much more in between. Like eventually it's like what is not psychedelic, or like what is more normal, the psychedelic states or common states.
I think that that's such a good thing. Like I always tell people, like I think one of the things I've come to understand is that we've got to shift away from this living for a ceremony and understanding that life is the ceremony. So like you're saying, like it's a cadence, it's a frequency, it's a vibration. And how do we bring that to everything? I think our kids are really good teachers for that because they're so purely still connected to the source.
How long did your postpartum depression last? Or if you can maybe give it time, because I know it can be difficult to scope.
I mean, I would say for the first like solid year of my oldest life, I was like teetering on a fine line between sanity, breakdown, breakthrough, like right on that tightrope in between, where some days I felt like, I don't know if I can be this epigenetic guard. I don't know how to quell the ancestor cries. And also, I feel like this is my assignment. And it was madness in there, but also like with a sense of purpose and love that I'd never felt to drive me, like the love you have for your child. So, I started my psychedelic personal healing journey pretty shortly into that postpartum period, which parts of me thought were crazy because I grew up evangelical. So, I was breaking a lot of rules. But I just felt called to that, and it was through those experiences that I feel like, I was told, do not have any more children. You had like the most traumatic, dangerous pregnancy and birth ever. Don't do that again. Please, for all of our sakes. I got pregnant again. I was diagnosed as having fertility issues. I got pregnant again without really trying. Or if I was trying, it was on the first sort of, okay, maybe we'll try. And I had 0 complications. My second son was born totally natural in a birth center with no medical interventions required. To me, what that says is that thank you, science, for how you saved my life the first time around, and also you don't know this whole mystery that's happening here, which is the woman's body, which is birth, which is like how spirits come through.
So can you talk to us a little bit about this process of you going through your postpartum depression, getting out of it, learning, maybe, what psychedelics did you use, if you want to mention that, or any modalities specifically? What helped you the most?
And what helped me the most? All of it. Intentionality, having the right support. I could not have done this alone. Like the mentors, the elders, the guides, the facilitators who impacted me and held space for me were just as important as the medicines. Because I believe through my own experience, like the wound was relational. I had to heal in a relational space. Medicine didn't cure me, but it helped to facilitate a relational repair that I didn't even know was possible. So, my first medicine to work with was MDMA, which was profoundly helpful because I did not love myself. And, MDMA is very good at helping us to love and forgive ourselves. I would say it's one of its superpowers. It's like its capacity to open our channel for empathy. And, my whole life from the evangelical backdrop, the message was that everything bad that had happened was ultimately my fault. And dare I say, woman's fault. Dare I say, Eve's fault for being curious in the garden. So it shut down my curiosity. It shut down my body. It shut down any possibility for pleasure or play. MDMA helped me to find those little kid parts that were so stunted in there, feeling already like at age 5, dirty, ashamed, responsible. And I spent, a fair amount of time just working with that medicine because I needed some serious deposits in the self-love department. And then I had a very strong feeling at some point, probably about a year in, that, the spirit of the mushroom was calling me, okay, you've learned a lot about what's under the hood of yourself. Good girl. Good job. But now what happens if you talk to a spirit that's not just your own? And I really believe psilocybin is a spirit. It's a relationship. So I began a relational journey with the spirit that is psilocybin. And to me, that spirit showed up as Earth Mother, as Pachamama. And that repair job was so deep and profound. I don't think I'd ever been mothered like that before. It feels like being mothered by the earth, like her helping me see what I didn't have, feel what secure attachment is, see through myriad examples, like a kaleidoscope of pictures in nature of how animals are as mothers, be it the otter, be it the lion. There are pictures of motherhood everywhere we look in the natural world. And so I think a lot of it was seeing all of that helped me come out of the lack of my family system didn't teach me this. So how am I going to ever do it? Meanwhile, nature has abundant examples for me to draw from, learn from.
So you learn a lot from nature. You say a phrase that I really like, which is nature deficit disorder. Can you talk to us about that? Why do we have it?
God bless. I mean, I appreciate technology. Here we are having this lovely conversation thanks to that. But also, how much time do we spend now on these machines versus in the natural world? You know what I mean? And I just think that maybe it was all the time I spent in Mexico. Maybe it was the curanderas who I had the opportunity to be taught and stewarded by there. But, there was a very strong message that there are these 3 pillars to being solid. One of them is your connection to the earth as mother. The second is your connection to your village. We don't do this alone. And the third is your understanding of right relationship and reciprocity. That we are not here to take, we are here to give and receive. And out of that alignment, it can't work. So nature was a big part of it. My integration happened in nature through nature. And I see that so much with people I work with now, the ones who really not only get better, feel better, but stay better, cultivate this relationship with the earth. I think that's where the kind of whole eco-psychology comes into play. We exist on this planet. There's a relationship there we have to tend to and repair.
It's beautiful what you're describing because it kind of, I just get this understanding that we can get, let's say, the relationship with your mother hasn't been perfect because her relationship with her mother hasn't been perfect. And there was maybe a line there somewhere, something was broken. But in the end of the day, we can always restart it again by forming a relationship with the earth, which is the mother, or, the God, which is the father, or whichever cosmology you believe in. But it's kind of in the end, we can always reconnect. It's kind of like when you talk to shamans and you ask them, I want to learn more about ayahuasca. They just say, well, nobody can teach you. Ayahuasca can teach you. Just drink it and it will show you. So in the way we have this ability to reset just by going back to those plant medicines. And it is interesting that you also mentioned, your parents always think that you had it better, because I have the same thing with my dad. He's like, oh, you had it so much better. And his childhood was tremendously traumatic. He could easily be a serial killer. You can say well, with this childhood, I understand and I forgive you. But I mean, he's somewhat abusive, but he's all right, And I'm so much better now with my kids. It's it is getting better. And then I think in the end of the day, all parents are always doing their best. So you live in Mexico, right? And you talk about learning a lot from the Latino culture. I'm coming to you here from Colombia, and my wife is Colombian. So it is triggering sometimes, when they're 1 hour late. There's a lot of like issues with the way we see the world differently, but there's also lots of lessons in how to differently treat life. Can you talk to us about that and what you learned from the Mexicans and from the Latinos?
Yeah, also could talk all day about this. But I just remember when we first moved there and this thing that you're describing where time isn't fixed, but it's fluid. When is the party going to start? It's like a range. Could be 6. 6 could mean 7. But it's not a problem because people just show up when they show up, and there's a flow and there's a non-urgency. And for me in the beginning, when I moved there, I almost felt like I had to detox from the American way of like everything being so fixed and immediate, like so much immediacy. It's strange to be, as I shared earlier, I'm here in the States actually right now, and I've been here for a little bit, and it's so strange to be back here after having been there for 6.5 years, because I'm like, oh, well, this is familiar to me because, I grew up in the States, but also the cadence, the rhythm of how things flow here don't feel quite right to my nervous system anymore. Like, I really so appreciate the slow, non-urgent pace of life, which, as you mentioned, can sometimes be frustrating because you're like, okay, people, but there's like 3 hours past when we said we were going to do something. But really, who cares? And most of the time, if people are late, it's because they got really engaged in something that was really important, like a conversation that could change a life. I mean, one of the things I most appreciate about Mexican culture is not only their fluidity about life and time, but also their like playfulness of spirit. And I feel like one of the ways that I have seen that most beautifully expressed is through how childhood is revered as sacred. When there's an expression amongst people in Mexico that kids are king, kids rule this country. And if you look around and you see the number of piñatas and celebrations for children, it's true. And I just think that is so beautiful. Like, what if all of us around the world revered childhood like that? Not only was that beautiful to witness for my kids, but healing for the inner child in me that wasn't allowed to play, that didn't know that was safe.
Definitely the importance of playfulness or lack thereof. Like we're just too serious all the time, and it's hard to enjoy life this way. As I like to say, I don't know much about Mexico, but I've been there a couple of times, and the culture seems to be very similar to Colombia. And here at Loara, so we have two teams. We have a ceremony team and like business team that's largely foreigners. And we have the hospitality team, which is largely Colombians. And I like to say, well, everything that's with this foreign team is going to be on time. And everything that's with the Colombian team, there's, plus minus 30 minutes. Please don't get offended. Because I say that their approach to time is also psychedelic. And there's not much you can do about it. I mean, we're more on time recently, but still there's, an occasional disruption in time-space continuum, and it just happens. But talking about culture, so you describe as moving to Mexico was a like a new beginning for you, and your healing journey sort of been jump-started by it. Would you recommend people to travel, to sort of reset their normal, and how, talk to us about that, moving and healing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like travel is another one we could put under the umbrella of psychedelic experience, right? Because again, our concept of self, our relationship to language, time, space, food, everything that makes us have a sense of I is shifted when we travel. And I think that is so valuable. It's humanizing. It's instructive. Like, to have the opportunity, I spent 6 years in Mexico. I will continue to spend time there now. I spent 5 years in Asia. Like, these experiences define my life. I always recommend people travel as a mechanism for healing themselves and understanding humanity better.
And as you traveled, you describe of finding your village. Talk to us about that. What does it mean, and why should everyone have a village?
There's a book, I talk about this book a lot because it's one of the top 5 for me of life changing, called The Wild Edge of Sorrow. And one of the quotes in that book says, "It is our greatest grief that the village did not appear. Not only were we longing for a mother and a father, but really 2 people never would have been enough. Because what we wanted was the whole village to hold our hands. So it is our greatest grief that the village did not appear." Never before have I read, that resonates with such depth in my soul. Like, we need the village. Humans are the only animals that don't understand, or we've forgotten how relational we are. Like, think about how many animals travel in packs. When did we stop doing that, and why? We should really reconsider. We're better together. The village is essential. I always tell people, if they contact me and they want to work with me as a guide, as a supporter, we can't do it until we make the village. And I'm not big enough to be your village. I'll be one in the village, but who else? And then when people are like, I don't know, there is no village like in America, for example. I'm like, well, the earth is mother is a great place to start.
Yeah, we have more people than ever now on the earth, but we're lonelier than we ever been. And I've just just bought the book on Audible. I'm gonna check it out. I'm always impressed with people that quote stuff from the books. It's like I recently interviewed Gabor Mate, and he just starts, to quote the books. I'm so impressed. I need to learn some passages myself because I feel not knowing stuff deep enough. So yeah, I totally agree with you regarding the importance of the community, and that we're tribal animals that for some reason forgot that we were tribal, and now, there's nothing natural about a couple having to deal with 3 kids, for example, without any support, because it's just too much for, it's lovely to spend a few hours a day with a kid because it's invigorating, it's beautiful. But if you have to do 24 hours, then you get burned out because, kids, they just operate on a different revolutions. They go fast, and they're a lot. But I think the community is even more important with work with plant medicines or psychedelics. Like, for example, here at Lawara, we notice that like big part of the healing comes from the community. When you take people together and you make a fire in the middle and you give them psychedelics, all of a sudden they revert to this natural mode of being, and they start supporting each other, and it's just so healing. So can you talk to us about that? Like, what have you noticed in your own work regarding like one-on-one work or group work and the importance of the community?
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of thoughts on this too. So I think there is a necessity to evolve in our healing to being in a relational space with a group, because I do ultimately think one of the measures of healing is, can we be in a village relational context again? All this hyper individuation is a trauma response. So now, that being said, I work with a lot of people who have very complex PTSD, meaning that their PTSD didn't just happen after one recent event. They don't even have a memory in their psyche in this lifetime, in this body, where they felt safe in relationship, where they knew secure attachment. So when people come to me in that space, I don't necessarily recommend that they go do group work first. Why? Not because it's not good, but because I want them to have an opportunity to process what's going on within their sovereign self before they go into a group with others. Because if you put a lot of people into a space together who have complex trauma that's not been processed, you're going to get a lot of what I would call transferential projections, meaning the wounds of the past projected onto the canvas of another. And that's beautiful ultimately, because then we can potentially repair. But if people haven't processed their trauma or been held at all in one safe space with secure attachment, they might get overwhelmed in a group. So I kind of think of it as like a graduation. We start here. We find the sovereign inside ourselves. We come to understand our shadows, our lights, how we project out and onto others. And then with that awareness, we go with great discernment into group, not throwing it everywhere, but like recognizing and being able to talk with like intention and consciousness. Like, oh, when you said that, that triggered this thing in me. And I wonder if we could explore it together. But it takes a lot of preliminary work, I think, for people to be able and ready to do that in a group context safely, transformatively.
I know that you work with curanderas, kind of like back to the topic of the tribe a little bit. I guess every tribe used to have curanderas. So what have you learned from there about, how to work with plant medicines properly, traditionally? What are the main sort of lessons and differences, for example, from the Western approach to psychedelics?
In some ways, almost every way. Let me give you an example. I remember one of the first curanderas I met when I moved to Mexico. And I was telling her, because I had studied the MAPS model for working with MDMA. And I was telling her how, I do this, and then I wait like 6 weeks, and then I have another session, and then I wait like 6 more weeks, and then I do another one, and I'm integrating in between. And she thought it was hysterical. And I was like, why are you laughing? And she was like, well, I just don't understand how anyone would ever think that you wouldn't forget everything that you learned in that 6 weeks. Because from a more indigenous model, you're going to submerge yourself. Like you're going to go deep into the ceremony and probably at minimum have 3 pretty close together before you come back out. Because we're trying to almost fertilize your system with the remembrance of nature, the nature that is inside us, that is the same as the nature that we live with. This was wildly different than following a protocol, doing all these things in a systematic way. Once again, it's sort of the same vein as what we were talking about before, things flow, as opposed to one of the things that worries me most about the clinical movement of psychedelics now is the commodification of something sacred, the protocolizing of something sacred. There's a big difference between a protocol and a ritual. But I don't know if in a Western context, people really get this sense, okay, if you burn Palo Santo, but you're not in the set or setting that's indigenous to that, is it have the same ritualistic impact? I don't know. Maybe it can. For me, I needed to be there. I needed to feel the whole thing and just be pummeled by it in the best way possible.
Yeah, for some reason, we always try to reinvent the bicycle. It's psychedelics have been done for thousands of years. There are existing traditions. Let's just learn from them. No, but we know better. Let's give you a mask and put you on a couch and put you in a room and with the 2 therapists or whatever and just charge you ton loads of money because it's fancy. Yeah, there's definitely value in that model, but I just hope that eventually people that work with plant medicines, they will just try and bridge and find a perfect combination of Western and Eastern, combine plant medicines in a traditional indigenous setting, but then add some talk therapy or integration, which is a beautiful combination. It works really well. I asked that question to all the people that wrote books about psychedelics, because obviously you analyze the topic really well. And your book specifically, Healing Psychedelics, is about how to heal with psychedelics. So my question is, how do you describe psychedelics? How do they work? What is the mechanism in your opinion?
Well, scientifically speaking, and I want to be clear that I'm not bashing clinical protocols in science, because I also love that stuff too. I really resonated with what you said about, I think of that in my own sort of self-identity as someone in this body of work. How can I be a steward who is a hybrid? Meaning, I'm walking with the learnings of both of those, the science and the more indigenous spirit of the work. But to get to your question about how it works, scientifically, I can explain it in terms of these medicines go into the brain and they create neurogenetic activity. And that is amazing because from a certain age, we automatically decrease our neurogenetic activity. That's what happens as we age. So when we introduce these medicines, we have an increase of plasticity, elasticity in our mind, and that enables us to have like new perspective on old things.
And from the point of view of curanderas, how would you explain it?
That you're remembering you are a primal creature. You are an animal in a body, and that you belong to yourself and the earth. And if you can return to the wisdom of the wild, everything will be fine. Your answers aren't up here. They're in here. They're in the earth. And I think the beauty of that is that both of those things are true. The science and the spirit.
Yeah, because we have a physical body and we have our emotional body and we have our soul, and those are just describing like different layers, different depth. Let's talk a little bit about trauma. You mentioned complex PTSD. You yourself have this religious trauma with evangelical background. What is trauma? How does one identify trauma, and how does one heal trauma with help of plant medicines or psychedelics?
Complex trauma in particular, as I was saying before, is when people there was never any safety. And there was never this golden period where everything was safe and then it fell apart. Complex trauma is usually marked or distinguished by there was an absence of safety and secure attachment from the very beginning, where PTSD might be more like an isolated event that happened and then that creates trauma. So I think I work mostly with complex PTSD survivors. That means that, we are going back often to the very beginning. Sometimes it can be to preverbal in utero trauma. Sometimes it can be early childhood, adolescence. And really, often I think of my work when I'm working, I'm drawing from the same well as when I am mother to my children, because survivors of complex trauma have living inside them like a complex world of little kid parts that were stunted in their development because they did not get the maternal, paternal reflection needed to develop. And so the medicines can enter in and create an openness, a receptivity to what I would refer to as corrective experiences. When an honorary sort of like archetypal mother, father figure can offer an update or an upgrade to the information stored in the nervous system. Like, for example, to make it concrete, that can be as simple as saying to someone who's felt responsible their whole life, like me, for everything that happened, this was not your fault. None of it was your fault. And then asking them, what do you feel in your body when I say that? And really inviting them to have this opportunity to explore how much their body organically, naturally responds to that right information. Like, we want to heal. We just need the support and the safety for it to happen.
So you mentioned preverbal trauma. How does one access those states, and how can one heal something so early, so deep, so, let's say, animalistic brain, so to speak?
I'll use myself as an example to make something that would otherwise be very esoteric a little bit more concrete, hopefully. But I actually think, I'm sure you're familiar with Bessel van der Kolk, the body keeps a score. I actually believe that the body remembers everything, that the mind sometimes works to forget. So like, for example, a very impactful healing sessions that I had, I relived the experience of being born, like being pulled out with forceps, being pulled out of this dark space that felt safe and encapsulated into chaos, and then handed to not my mother, but my father. And I felt in my body, he doesn't want me. I don't remember any of that cognitively, but because I think that neurogenetic activity makes us be able to access stuff that our cognitive, linguistic, narrative brain can't recall. Doesn't mean it's not there. That shit was real. I felt it in my body. My body trembled and shook to show me how real it was. And I think the potency of people being able to recall things like that is the pathway to wholeness.
Yeah, that sounds very, very scary. I never went that far into the past. A lot of work that happens with ayahuasca, for example. Naturally, there's a lot of purging through body, a lot of shaking, a lot of movement and sweating and purging, and it feels like, your body gets lighter. In your practice, like what are some of the most impressive transformation stories with people healing with the help of plant medicines?
There have been so many amazing things that I have witnessed that I still am just sort of like, what? That's possible? Let me just dole out a few. There's a couple chapters devoted to these stories in my book, but one of the human beings who his journey and healing and getting to be part of that has impacted me the most. The first time I met him, he was not able to physically walk, and so in a wheelchair. This was even before medicine. He said to me something like, it occurred to me as I was doing my preparation work that maybe this quote unquote disability is a way for me to hide from life because I'm scared, because I'm wounded. And I was like, well, that feels like there's something to it. I didn't know if he was going to walk again, but he did. He does. Oh my God. And sometimes he still has setbacks and needs to sit and needs to use the cane. But it's not like his healing is any less profound. He has a wildly different life now than when I met him. He didn't leave the house. He was scared of everything. And now he has a life. That's amazing.
That's very impressive indeed. Some of the transformations that can happen, and the speed of them sometimes as well is very impressive. Like lifetimes of pain just sort of going away very quickly. Let's spend last minutes talking about your book. Who is your book for, and why should people read it?
Yeah, thanks for this question. So the book is really written for a couple of main, I would say, participants, readers. First and foremost, as I've watched this whole field kind of explode over the last 5 to 10 years, and all the stuff we were mentioning before about the prices, and it's just really clear to me that some of the people who need this work the most are not going to be able to access it because it's not available financially. So I want to be explicit in saying that I don't think a book can ever replace a skilled facilitator in total. But, I know because I lost someone in my life who tried to go this road alone, and she's no longer with us. And when she passed, I was like, well, I'm writing the book. And then if people who want to go this journey and they don't want to go it alone, they can find a companion guide through the book. The book walks them through the whole arc of the psychedelic journey, from preparation to medicine work to integration. And very intentionally, the book is a combination of science. Why is this working? How is this working? And also narrative, real life stories of how this wound looked under the metaphysical surgery, if you will, as well as exercises that people can do to support their own integration. I think the other people who have shared with me that the book's been really meaningful for them are people thinking about and wanting to explore being a facilitator and wanting to know, how do I go about things like conscious touch, safe touch? How do I not make this worse? How do I help, in an integral way? So that the book is also for those folks as well.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for doing the work. It's very valuable these days, and I totally agree with you with the topics of affordability, accessibility. That's what I focus on a lot as well. Micah, it was a pleasure to have a conversation with you.
And you as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Where can people find more about you?
Yeah. People can find me on my website at micahstover.com. You can find my book there. I have a newsletter that people can sign up for where I share about podcasts like this or classes I'm teaching. On Instagram, people can find me at Micah Sugarfoot. Those are probably some of the best places.
Thank you, Micah. Thank you for this conversation. Guys, you've been listening to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, we do the host and believe, and I'll see you in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to support us and psychedelic renaissance at large, please follow us and leave us a like wherever it is you're listening. Share this episode with someone who will benefit from this information. Nothing in this podcast is intended as medical advice, and it is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This episode is sponsored by La Huayra Ayahuasca Retreat. At La Huayra, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. La Huayra, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you.